Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Global DEI Conference, where we unite under the banner of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This event is brought to you by Ludo and One Business World, and it's important to dive into this crucial dialogue and contribute to shaping a more equitable and inclusive world. It's a pleasure now for me to introduce Tiffany Hinton. She is the Chief Diversity Officer at Elizabeth City State University, and she will be discussing prioritizing LGBTQ students' experiences at rural HBCUs. So, Tiffany, much look forward to hearing you speaking now, and I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, James. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Tiffany Hinton. I serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Chief Diversity Officer at Elizabeth City State University. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the impactful work that we've done on our campus to prioritize LGBTQ students' experiences on our campus. I'm going to start a little bit about, we're going to define HBCUs and their social impact on global education. We'll talk a little bit about Black royalty and its influence on Black culture as it relates to LGBTQ individuals. We'll also review anti-LGBTQ legislation that's happening this year in several states among our nation, and to consider some things as we're prioritizing or affirming a campus culture for LGBTQ individuals. Lastly, we'll talk about the inclusive strategy that we used at our campus, our HBCU, to center LGBTQ students' experiences into mattering. Traditionally, HBCUs have been recognized as places of access and belonging for marginalized identities. They have been, and I'll argue that they still are, the cornerstone of education for Black Americans. HBCUs have a rich history of providing access to education, regardless of race, age, or gender. The Title III of the Higher Education Act of 1965 defined HBCUs as being prior established to 1964, and their principal mission was to kind of educate Black Americans, and that is accredited by a national recognized accrediting agency or association determined by the Secretary of Education to be a reliable authority as the quality of training offered is, or according to such an agency or association making reasonable progress towards accreditation. The Department of Ed in 2018 identified 107 HBCUs nationwide, serving more than 228,000 students. About 50 of them are public institutions, 56 of them are private, and HBCUs represent about 3% of the higher education institutions in our nation. More than 80% are four-year institutions, and 17% of them have been land grant established under the Morrill Act of 1890. And so HBCUs have a place in society, and they've been impactful in educating students across the nation. When we think about HBCUs and queer identifying students, we have to recognize that majority of these minority serving institutions have this religious foundation or some religious tie, whether that's Christian, Methodist, Baptist, or whatever. They also have a conservative, heteronormative culture and climate. You look at their policies and practices, and these things can contribute to marginalization of LGBTQ students and their needs. Additionally, the Black culture and their beliefs impact campus culture and their climates for this population and can contribute to hostile, unaffirming, unwelcoming environments for queer students. Dr. Steve Mobley and Johnson stated, that HBCUs and their students exist at a crossroads. They said that an intersection of bordering spaces constituted by race, gender, and sexuality. We believe that HBCUs can no longer disregard the presence of LGBTQ students on their campuses, nor can they continue to disregard the connections that exist between student identity, student sense of belonging, and college persistence. Now is the time for faculty and administrators at HBCUs to have dialogues about confronting stereotypes and challenging HBCU students, faculty, and administrators to extend conversations surrounding LGBTQ issues on their campuses and the larger community. The ways that HBCUs provide support for their LGBTQ populations will undoubtedly impact higher ed, Black communities, and society at large. A strong impact of this is contributed to Black royalty. When we think about Black royalty, we're talking about race, we're talking about place, we're talking about community. Black Americans live in different types of communities, and like anyone, where you live shapes what you think. Literature shows that rural areas exhibit more conservative, right-wing attitudes and beliefs. The power dynamics between race, place, and community at play make it difficult for queer students or queer people who want to show up as their whole selves. If the Black community sees homosexuality as taboo or treats people who identify as queer as outsiders, then what does that mean for our students who come to college to discover? They're coming to discover themselves, who they are and what they believe in, what they like and what they don't like, what majors or careers they want to go after and pursue. But they're also coming to discover others, how others see them, interact with them, how they believe, how they think. It's a part of being a global leader, a global individual, a global citizen. And when we think about HBCUs that exist in these rural communities, we have to consider the landscape and how our queer students experience Black royalty on our campus and off our campus. This slide depicts anti-LGBTQ legislation in this year alone, 2023, across the nation. You can see the ACLU has been tracking anti-LGBTQ bills against LGBTQ rights. And there's more than 507 alone this year that have come into session. My institution is situated in North Carolina, and you can see that there are more than 10 bills being brought forth to target LGBTQ rights in our state alone. So this is another layer that we have to consider and address as administrators, as faculty and staff members, when we're looking at supporting our students and helping them to navigate their identity and their college experience. These bills further harm and create unwelcoming, unaffirming spaces for LGBTQ persons. So let's talk about the work that we did considering this landscape and all all the cards that are at play. The work occurred at Elizabeth City State University, where I work. It's a small public HBCU in rural northeastern North Carolina. There are roughly 2,200 students, majority full-time and African American at the institution. The work that I did was guided by theory in the field. Schlossenberg's mattering and marginality theory, which focuses on sense of belonging and how to move queer students from feeling like they were marginalized at our institution into mattering. And these 5 domains of mattering: attention, importance, egoistic, dependence, and appreciation were all used as framework to guide students into mattering at our institution. So how do we pay attention to them? How did we show them that they were important? How do we allow them to identify themselves and use that as an extension to help them see that they matter as a part of our community? We depended on them. We showed them that we were wanting to include them in our practices and our policies and the things that we had going on at our institution. But we also showed them that we supported them and appreciated them. And that was the last phase of using this theory to move students from the margins into mattering at our institution. I also looked at Shine's organizational culture theory, which looks at the artifacts of the organization, the values and assumptions that people have, what things did we have at our institution as it relates to artifacts, values, or beliefs and assumptions, and what things needed to be developed in order to shift our culture towards inclusion for our LGBTQ students. Using an action research design, which means that I actually worked with the student, right, to move this work forward and to create an affirming and inclusive environment for our LGBTQ students. I'm ensured that I used students or worked with students who, one, self-reported and identified as queer, two, was of the age of 18, right, an adult, and enrolled at the institution. We looked at their lived experiences, right? I wanted to know, what is your experience on our campus? Is it bad? Is it good, negative, or positive? And how can we, number two, create an intervention or it's a set of initiatives to support and improve your experience at our institution? Lastly, after we created these sustainable initiatives at our institution, we wanted to know, what were the effects of them, right? Did it help improve your sense of belonging, your sense of mattering at our institution, or did it not? And using that feedback, we could determine whether or not these initiatives were to continue or to stop at our institution. Here's a list of all the students who kind of were thought partners in this work. You can see there's a diverse group of sexual orientation, gender identity, age, and even classification of the student at our institution. We had lesbian identifying students, we had queer and gay, we had bisexual individuals also involved. In working with the students, I found that there were some challenges that they faced on our campus as it relates to coming out and the culture, specifically race and religion. There were some experiences that were good, but there also was some experiences that were negative, and that we found that we had a lot of work to do on our campus to create a welcoming campus climate for our students who identified as LGBTQ. There were a couple of specific things that came out of connecting with the students and learning about their experiences. This idea of daring to come out, they identified, right, self-identified as LGBTQ, but they had to become okay with that. They had to accept their sexuality, right? And so that was a process that students struggled with. And then on our campus, after accepting who they were, their sexuality, their identity, they had to then come out to others, and dealing with the acceptance or non-acceptance of others was a challenge that our students spoke about. They also talked about the cultural challenges to acceptance, right? So once I get accepted, once I am out, I've explored my sexuality, I've said it and disclosed to others, there was a piece of the culture in accepting that, and folks not being on board or accepting one's identity. And our students talked about how they grew up, right, and the impact of the African-American household on acceptance and those values, that Black royalty that we talked about earlier. There were some religious doctrine and scriptures that came out of acceptance, right? People don't accept me because of their religion and what doctrine and scripture says about homosexuality. And so that was a cultural challenge that our students expressed, and that we had to lean into to understand and to support them through. And then out of all of that, students were able to share what were some of the positive experiences that they had on our campus and who contributed to that socially, and then what were the negative experiences. And so here are some of the experiences that our students talked about identifying as queer on a historically Black campus or institution. Students mainly had positive responses around, the school feeling like a family oriented environment, that they were welcomed in a good way when they came to campus. People were happy that they were there, right? But then when we dug further into what did that mean, right? We found that there were several negative responses, right? People were happy that students were there, but they weren't so happy that a gay student was there or present on campus. And so some of the responses on the screen depict that. Jamal said that he was in class, right? And he had a student, when they were talking about Homo sapiens in a psychology class, what that meant. He said that a student said, um, um, was like, what a Homo sapien, what? And he said they better not call me a homo. That and he and Jamal's response to that was, are you dumb? Like, do you associate being homosexual, being Homo sapien, and using those two terms interchangeably? Bella, who was another student, talked about an experience with a faculty member. And she said that her faculty member thought that she was gay. She said, I guess the way that she presented herself, she walked in sweats and stuff. And I mean, it was 8 o'clock in the morning. She didn't want to dress up for one class. She said that the professor saw her dress up one day and was like, you're not gay, right? Based upon the way in which she dressed. She wasn't dressed down in sweats or baggy pants, that she actually put on a dress up attire, a dress. And the professor kind of prejudged her based upon that. Jamal also talked about, and Bella talked about other experiences on campus outside of the classroom, with suite mates or people that they lived with. They talked about how people are just mental out here. They look at you weird because you're gay. They are not welcoming. Everybody thinks that everybody is gay, especially if you associate with the LGBTQ community. Jamal said, in the absence of a campus wholly accepting me, I just pick and choose who I give my full energy to, right? And so he was noting that there are spaces and places and people that accept him and that don't accept him. And so he had to, in his mind, determine where he paid attention to that energy and where he would not. After learning about the students' experiences, we implemented several trainings and workshops to address heterosexism and support LGBTQ students on our campus. There were training, workshops, programming, not only just for students, but also for faculty and staff. We wanted to address the entire campus because we learned from our students that their negative experiences, were happening inside of the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. And so we wanted to build a more inclusive campus climate. And to do that, we had to involve all the stakeholders on our campus. And so on the screen, you'll see some of the initiatives that we did. We started Safe Zone training, which was a training that provided, appropriate terminology for you referring or speaking to LGBTQ individuals, talked about the challenges and issues that they face as a community and how to be supportive. There's also a section of becoming an ally, a part of that training. We invited queer identifying individuals, authors, artists, and others to, hold poetry nights on our campus, to hold book chats and conversations. We invited pastors and local ministers to come on our campus and talk about inclusive spaces and the intersectionality between race and religion and sexuality. We also had stuff for our queer identifying students, right? We had support groups for them where they dealt with the counseling center, professional development opportunities for them, and thinking about career aspirations and how to deal with your identity or let your identity shine in spaces that aren't affirming, even when you leave the institution and go into your career choice. We also had paint and chat nights, talent shows, all the way up to the chancellor, chat and choose with the chancellor. And so on every level, we wanted the students to know that, one, we appreciate you and we accept you in our community, but we're doing things at every level, from students, from faculty, staff, and administrators, to move the campus culture and the cultural climate towards inclusivity for the LGBTQ students, moving them out of the margins where they're not seen, where nothing was happening, to out loud, as our students would say, and about on our campus community. After implementing these things on our campus, I met with the students again, that number 3 objective, to really learn about the effects of these initiatives on their experiences as LGBTQ students on our campus. And here are a few remarks from the students. Brianna shared, I wish that we had more events like this my first semester or year here. I think a lot of students would have benefited from it, including me. I mean, it wasn't just that I wasn't myself back then, but I felt validated seeing the attendance from my peers and these events and how people responded to flyers and events. It was all love. I felt like it was okay to be myself, be gay around gay and non-gay students on campus. Cameron said the university is working towards building a sustainability for LGBTQ students. When I first got here, I didn't see anything for the community. Now the PACE Center is ours. True Colors is official, recognized or student organization on campus, and there are more programs and workshops to teach people about sexuality outside of heterosexism. This speaks to Shine's organizational cultural theory and how we use the artifacts, the assumptions, the beliefs, right, to create change at our institution. We created a PACE Center, and that is our diversity center, where LGBTQ students have a safe place to go and to commune, and others to come and learn about the identity. We also created the student organization specifically for students who identified as LGBTQ on our campus. And so these were artifacts, these were structures that we put in place to increase the support for LGBTQ students on our campus. Finally, Jamal ended us out and he said, this semester was lit. Even the non-LGBTQ students, were vibing. And so it was a moment of pride that these students felt in their institution, and that increased their sense of belonging and mattering, their connectedness to the community, improving their campus climate for this community of students. This speaks again to the acceptance of others. Jamal kind of shared some more mattering at the institution. They talked about it was a good feeling for me. I felt like I was a celebrity. He and other True Colors members were provided an opportunity to meet with Salsa Santana. This Salsa Santana is a out gay artist that we brought to campus for the students' enjoyment, to expose them to the artistry of a queer individual in the social media eye and in global society. And our students enjoyed that opportunity. They also spoke about the chat and chew that I mentioned earlier with the chancellor. Allie said that she appreciated the fact that the chancellor allowed her to eat in the boardroom with her. She felt official. And then Cameron ended sharing that he felt feelings of appreciation and that he was cared about during the luncheon with the chancellor as well. And so here again, you see the moving the students from marginalization into mattering, that they were included and felt a sense of belonging at our institution through these simple initiatives that we implemented on our campus. This work was effective, but it was not me. It was because of our students. They matter to us at our institution. And if you work at a college campus or you deal with people, this population should matter to you too. We ran into some challenges because of lack of resources, the fact that we're in a rural space, in a place, the politics that exist, the beliefs and assumptions about in the culture in the South about homosexuality and LGBTQ persons persisted, but we kept reminding people of our duty and our mission to serve and support our students. Our student experiences and their narratives was powerful, as you've just heard, and they really helped us as an institution make progress in our efforts to provide an inclusive, welcoming climate for all. We really had to dare to change. And that really meant, one, understanding the unique needs of our LGBTQ students, right? So sitting down with them, like I started in the beginning with point one, and really saying, what are your lived experiences here in our environment, right? Tell me the good, tell me the bad. And then using that information to create supportive environments, right? Using strategies based upon the experiences of LGBTQ individuals to impact change and to decrease marginalization and increase opportunities for mattering on the campus. And then lastly, our dare to change, and what I dare you to do, a call to action for you, is to implement the change, right? After you hear the experiences, after we heard good and bad, and we worked with our students to create an avenue of support to help them to see that they are a part of our environment, our community. We do appreciate and respect them, and that we are making changes to make sure that the environment is welcoming. We had to implement it, right? And doing that, we had to work collaboratively with others, our students, our faculty, and our staff to kind of move and shift the culture. I want to thank you so much for your time. My contact information is listed on the screen if you have any questions. I'm going to pass it back over to James in hopes that I can answer any questions that have come in.
Well, Tiffany, thank you very much. This is quite a challenging issue, dealing with LGBTQ. And, you know, I understood what you were saying, and I just had a couple of questions. Are you under pressure from the state, from the government, and from religions on not accepting it all?
Yeah, that's a good question, James. Thank you for that. I think we experience some pressure, right? We have some legislation that we've talked about, 10 bills in our state coming down and being not supportive of LGBTQ rights and resources and supporting that community on our campus. But we have a strong pride and sense of support from leadership at our institution. And even our institution is a part of a UNC system, which is like 16 other colleges that make up public institutions that make up a system that we are a part of in North Carolina. And there are colleagues who are supportive of the work there. And so we found our allies, we found the people who advocate for us to support this community. And so even with the pushback, even with, okay, we can't do this, there were ways in which we maneuvered to do and to support the community with what we could do.
Yeah. Okay. And are there specific arguments that you used that get people to open their minds a bit? Because there are a lot of people who are just refusing to listen to any arguments because fundamentally they're against it.
Yeah.
And therefore they don't listen. So are there arguments that you use that help open people's minds?
Yeah, for sure. I think it depends on the community in which I'm speaking to. But one thing that I don't change is I don't try to change people's views or values, right? I respect difference. And so a lot of the work that I did when I ran up against people who didn't want to change, who didn't want to hear or support the work that we were doing to support our students, was that, okay, I won't support you. I mean, I won't go against you, right? But I do want you to understand that we have a duty and a responsibility. If I'm talking to people of faith, right? I use the term that God loves everyone, you know, God loves all the children, yellow, black, white, red, and white, right? And that no sin is bigger than any other sin, right? If I'm talking to faculty and staff, I use terminology of sense of belonging, inclusion, and mattering, because those buzzwords resonate with our mission statement of the institution. And so I use strategic language and I use our university priorities to shift conversation So you don't have to support it personally, but you do have to support these students who show up at our institution and who are different and believe differently than you. And so you have to put aside, right, our personal beliefs and do the work. And the work is making sure that we support our students through their tenure at our institution.
Yeah, that's all. That's a very important point. Even if people don't agree with that kind of behavior, at least to accept the existence and that they're normal human beings.
Yeah.
And that they should be accepted. And each person has his differences. And even though we have this tendency to reject people we don't agree with or things like that, this is a very important step forward. And I think it must be a huge effort to keep it going like this and to put up with the resistance. So
Absolutely.
I want to thank you very much for your contribution. It's very enlightening, and we look forward to future contacts.
Thank you so much, James.
Well, thank you very much.